What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. We still don't know who's going to be throwing passes in the Berg, but we do have some news to kind of talk about that I think is notable. Just jumping on here real quick to talk about the Steelers' acquisition of six-time Pro Bowler and reigning Super Bowl champ Darius Slay. After 5 seasons in Philly, they cut his contract a year short, instantly finds a home. This connection is one that's not overly surprising. His new one-year contract to remain in Pennsylvania is 10 million, fully guaranteed. So like CP2 type of money, it's a little less than 4% of the salary cap. I think that's overall pretty fine. If you guys recall, Slay went on his YouTube channel / podcast a couple years ago to talk about, there was interest from Pittsburgh about trading for him when he was on the trade block. I think around like 2022 or so, guys on the defense were hitting him up. He spoke really glowingly of Mike Tomlin as well. So there's some connections there, some prior interest that I think makes some sense. I went back and watched about a half a dozen games. Most of those were down the stretch just so I could get the best feel of what he is as a player. Watched most of his targets as well. So I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what he is as a player at this point in his career. Kind of want to talk through, just like we normally do, strengths, weaknesses, just overall thoughts on the deal from both sides, mainly from a performance standpoint. Just before I do that, if you guys would hit that like button, subscribe, make sure you hit the bell for notifications, drop me a comment to let me know what you guys think about the signing, all that stuff. Helps the algorithm, and I really appreciate it. So Darius Slay turned 34, I believe, on New Year's. Obvious connections, I already mentioned, prior trade interest, things like that. But Andy Weidel was in that Philadelphia front office back in the day when they actually made the splash trade to acquire Slay from Detroit. Speaking of Detroit, there's some overlap there as well. Steelers defensive coordinator Tara Austin was his DC with the Lions for 4 seasons, including in 2017, which was his lone all-pro season. I think he had 8 picks, led the NFL in pass deflections and interceptions that year. So definitely some familiarity with the coaching staff, with the front office. Slay kind of went and, kind of declared that he had one more season left. He felt like he wanted to give it another go back. And I can understand why after watching the tape for sure. He does have solid size. He's listed around 6 foot, 190 pounds, but he's got over 32-inch arms. We're going to talk a little bit about just how that length is a real asset for him. But I mean, this is a dude, obviously just a ton of experience. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's played almost 11,000 career defensive snaps. So that's really helpful. I think just to have that, been there, done that type of experience in the room is good, especially when you got a room full of young players like Joey Porter Jr. going into his 3rd season. Same with Corey Trice, guys that probably could use a mentor of such. So, he's not the kind of, in Detroit when he was with Austin the first time, he was traveling everywhere with the opposing team's best player. CB1, he was going into the slot, this and that. Obviously, he's not that player anymore. Last year, he played exclusively on the left side, the rookie Quinyon Mitchell, who had a fantastic rookie season and credited, spoke glowingly of kind of Slay helping him along too, played on the right side. Most of the time, like cornerbacks, you don't want to pay corners that kind of like dreaded 3rd contract just because once guys at this position get into their 30s, it's usually when father time starts to catch up. But, Slay has, not to say all of his seasons in his 30s have been great. I thought he had a little bit of a down season in 2023, but this is a really nice bounce back in 2024. And the fact that he's able to fend off father time has been really impressive. How he's been able to do that is just from a technical perspective, this dude is a pure technician. Some of the best technical work, I feel like, at the position. Just really the last of a dying breed, in my opinion, is the way I kind of described it when I was writing up an article for Steelers Now, just in a multitude of different ways. One, just backpedaling and understanding how to play from a pedal is kind of like a lost art for the cornerback position. He's still super comfortable doing that. He stays really low. His feet are still really light. Does a good job remaining square to the receiver, and that allows him to kind of break efficiently on routes. There's a lot of good stuff on his tape that help him make a lot of plays on the ball. He's a guy who, just given the experience, he always knows where his help is to kind of funnel guys. He's also an expert, in my opinion, at reading body language. Receivers, you're taught to keep your eyes in the right spot and avoid getting kind of deked out with head and shoulder fakes. But he keeps his eyes low where they're supposed to be. But he also has a good feel for tempo of wide receivers and when they're about to break. you'll see him on third down situations, red zone and stuff like that, squat on routes, especially on like 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, and then take really efficient pass to the ball. He is a calculated risk taker, I think. You will see him try to undercut routes to make plays on the ball, like last season alone, including the playoffs. He had 16 pass breakups, I believe. So that was really good ball production. He only picked off one pass, but he was consistently in tight coverage for the most part. His transitions are pretty smooth for his age. I actually think that he has a little bit more juice than you would expect from like a click and close standpoint. So he's oftentimes like playing with about like 8 yards of cushion or something like that. But when he does see throws underneath, he does drive on them with urgency. And it's, there is a little bit of burst still left there despite his age. So like I said, the ball production is fantastic. You just look at the numbers. He forced PFF charts forced incompletion. So it's very similar like pass deflections, but he forced a completion on 20% of his targets last year. That was 7th best among corners with at least 250 snaps. So pretty good. I mean, when you stack that up against all the good players at that position league wide. Zone coverage, they played a lot of zone coverage in Philly. We're going to talk about that kind of transition into Pittsburgh. But like I said, he's going to jump on underneath throws. He keys the shoulder of the quarterback to get a good tell if, like, it's a deep throw, if it's a quick throw, quick game, pretty reliable there. Cloud responsibilities, he does a good job, funneling, getting his hands on the wide receiver to shorten the path for the safety. And also, like when throws to the flat. So if you play quarters or you're playing a lot of that deep shell contour, you do give up a lot of throws from the flat. But he does a good job, rallying to the ball. Usually pretty under control. He's a reliable tackler. Like 10% missed tackle rate is pretty solid for a cornerback. That's usually what you want to see. So passes off routes good. He's a good communicator. When I watched them, something that was big difference between watching them and watching the Steelers play last year specifically is defending motions, stacks, bunches. Slay's a guy who just there weren't any busted assignments, and that's not just a credit to him, but more of the back seven in general. But they just felt really connective on the back end, and that's experience for sure. But they had some youngsters working in there too, and it was just really impressive to me that there weren't a lot of like busted assignments, considering how many of those we saw in Pittsburgh down the stretch when they really struggled defensively. One thing I really love just about Slay, and this often comes with just playing in the league, I feel like a long time, but it is a really important kind of cliche thing to talk about the position. You have to have that like next man mentality to where if you get beat on a rep, you have to be able to bounce back, clear it out of your head, and just, put one foot in front of the other and let it go. And I think Slay definitely is a good example of that. One example that I did come across on film was against the Panthers last year, late in the regular season. Jonathan Mingo kind of crossed him up, gave him a little bit of sauce at the top of the route, ran a post on him. The ball was like thrown really, really well from Bryce Young. Mingo dropped what really should have been a game-winning touchdown. He wasn't able to secure it going to the ground, but it was obviously not a good play from Slay's perspective. He comes back a couple plays later. It's like 4th and ball game, and he ends up traveling with the crosser all the way over the field with, like, I think it was Adam Thielen. He jumps the crosser, like makes a diving pass deflection to end the game. So it's just like understanding, like, hey, that rep sucks. Let's get back after it. And that just comes with experience. It comes with confidence. And Slay is a guy who definitely doesn't lack confidence, at least from what I, see on the field. But I just think I mentioned the one interception from this past season too. It was against the Packers. He was guarding Dontavian Wicks, really good route runner, but he was out there on an island. They ended up motioning across the formation. He got stuck one-on-one. He's, playing from a pedal. He's able to, quickly turn, flip his hips, run, stay in phase, and then locate the football. So locating the football, understanding, where the ball is, whether it's he needs to play through the hands or, just having good timing, I think, at the catch point is something that Slay does well too. I think, again, that just comes with experience playing the position. But, in terms of like negatives, you guys have heard me talk about this, but cornerback is a stopwatch position. It's just the straight line speed for him is no longer a strength like it was in the prime of his career. So a good example of that was, Jermaine Burton, rookie receiver from the Bengals. He has good speed. He flew by him last year when he was in press. I really felt like when watching his film, a lot of his worst reps really came in press. 3 of the 4 touchdowns that he allowed last year came out of press coverage. He's just much more comfortable playing off. You're going to give up some freebies, some cheap throws underneath in the quick game, especially in that kind of system, which like anything under 5 yards is like the no cover zone. So there were a lot of throws out there that I felt like may have been like charted to him, depending on like what sites you use and things like that. But I do think that he still has the ability to play man coverage if you do allow him to play off. The biggest thing with Slay that I saw was, some of his worst reps were pretty poor. And I just think that it comes back to the lack of like recovery ability to get himself out of like compromising positions, because cornerback is a lot like offensive line. Like you need that kind of, I think it's like really an innate skill that you can't really learn, but you also have to be athletic enough to pull off to where, you can be a technician and oftentimes put yourself in good position. But the guys on the other side of the ball, they get paid too. There's a lot of great receivers, just like there's a lot of great edge rushers. So reacting to those movements, like you're gonna take a wrong step. You're gonna open your hips up a little bit too early. You're gonna miss a jam, or when you're trying to get that contact key. The thing that I noticed with Slay is like when those things did happen, he no longer has like the acceleration, the burst, the speed to get himself back in plays. And there, to be fair, in the games that I watched, there were some explosive play opportunities that were left on the field. CeeDee Lamb beat him on a double move, but the ball was underthrown. I already mentioned the one from Mingo. There were a couple other different examples of like Brandon Cooks also. I thought the Dallas game was probably one of the worst games that I watched from him. Brandon Cooks, his quickness gave him a little bit of issues. That game wasn't like competitive in the second half, but there's some stuff like that you can see like his age kind of popping up, just unable to get himself back into phase. But, for me personally, like transitioning to the Steelers scheme, it is going to be quite a bit different. You just look at just the differences in scheme. Philadelphia played man coverage at a below league average rate, like less than 25%, I believe, last year, according to Field Vision. The Steelers were about like 35%. So it's about a 10% upgrade in that regard, which doesn't seem like a lot, but those man coverage, those single responsibilities, there's going to be an uptick in this system. The other big difference is just the pre-snap contour between both systems. Philadelphia has like a middle field disguise rate of where they're changing the picture a lot post snap. They have the second highest disguise rate or something like that in the NFL at almost like 40%. The Steelers are around like 15%. I mean, if you guys all watching this channel know this, but I mean, the Steelers run like a really static defense. So a lot of the time when quarterbacks are getting to the line of scrimmage, they're seeing a deep post safety in the middle of the field, and they know like it's either, cover 1, cover 3. There's not a lot of post snap rotations aside from the occasional non-traditional Tampa things like that. But when you get those kind of pre-snap indicators, quarterbacks immediately know like, okay, I got one-on-one, So he is going to have the benefit of playing behind what we hope is a good pass rush and should be a good pass rush, hopefully better than it was last year. But he is going to be put in more difficult assignments. I don't think the Steelers scheme does cornerbacks a lot of, favors. And I think that Slay is somebody that can absolutely still play. I thought that his tape was quite good, surprisingly good, to be honest with you, because I expected to kind of turn it on and have to kind of almost talk myself into a signing like this. I don't actually think that that's the case. I actually think that Slay was quite good last year. The obvious caveat is, can he do it again at this age? Like 34, 35-year-old cornerbacks. I mean, we're basically in like uncharted territory for the modern NFL. So there's no really way to tell. I mean, there is obvious physical decline in his game, but there's nothing to like, it didn't preclude him last year from playing really good ball. And it wasn't just a product of him playing on one of the league's best defenses. Like, I just think he was still able to kind of navigate some of those physical limitations with how smart he is, how technically sound he is, just how consistent he is on a snap to snap basis. So, it's going to be interesting to watch. I think the weird part of it was, the more I watched of Slay, and I'll probably watch some more, so maybe I feel a little bit differently, but the more I watched the Slay, the more convinced I was that he could do this again for one more year, and the Steelers could get good return on investment on a 1-year, $10 million contract. But I guess I just more confused, I guess, from both the player and the team standpoint, like why this marriage would kind of come to fruition. Like for Slay, if you want to play one more year, I would have thought that he would have went maybe ring chasing. I know there were some comments out there that he would have been interested in going back home and playing in Detroit, finishing his career kind of where he started. Perhaps there just wasn't any interest from the Lions. They went out and paid DJ Reed, paid kind of sticker price for a player like him. They drafted a couple corners last year. Maybe they just didn't have the use for him, weren't interested in that, which I totally get. I would have just kind of pictured somebody that, still has, I think, some good ball left in him. I would have anticipated he would have wanted to kind of go join a contender to try to maybe get another ring. Or maybe, his market in terms of like finances, because I don't think the $10 million price point it's definitely not crazy. In retrospect to like how he played last year, maybe there just weren't other teams for real interested. But for the Steelers' perspective, I see the vision in terms of him providing you stability next year. I think there's even some benefits in terms of like being a mentor with younger guys like Trice, like Porter, that won't show up in the box score. I think it's just a little bit disappointing, in my opinion, that they had all of this financial flexibility. We did the video on the corners, but there were just so many good corners out there that could potentially help you not just this year, but 2 years from now, 3 years from now, when the Steelers are hopefully in a better quarterback position and maybe could make one last push before the end of Cam Hayward's career, the end of TJ Watt's prime, Micah Fitzpatrick's prime, stuff like that. So I would have kind of liked to prefer them to go that route, but I'm not overly disappointed in the addition as a whole, just like from a face value standpoint, just because I do think that Slay's film was pretty solid last year. So that's a long rant about Darius Slay. You guys can let me know if y'all have any questions. Like I said, the scheme fit is going to be a little bit of a tricky one, but this is not. I mean, you guys know that I'm a straight shooter regardless. So I told you guys last year when we did the Dante Jackson video that I thought that Dante Jackson was more of a CB3. Didn't think his film was nearly as good. I think a lot of people were just trying to talk themselves into that signing. Was curious about that scheme fit as well. Things didn't really work out great. Patrick Peterson, his last year in Minnesota was actually pretty solid. It wasn't this good though. So I know there's going to be a lot of comparison between those two guys, just because those two guys are two of the better corners of this generation that have played at a high level, been like legit CB1 alpha type dudes on the boundary. But I do think that Slay's a better player right now than Peterson was when he came over. Now, again, Peterson thing didn't work out. This could not work out either. So there's obvious risk involved. But I do think, just looking at the film last year, that there's a chance that this, returns good on investment. So let me know what you guys think of the signing, just overall about Slay. There's obviously some other news that I'll probably jump on here, maybe in a podcast form. Maybe me and John will get together or something like that to talk a little bit more in depth about. They made some special team signings. They signed Malik Harrison, 2 years, $10 million. There's a contract out there, probably a 1 year deal, if I'd imagine, for Brandon Echols from the Jets. Another special teams kind of depth cornerback, played a little bit outside, a little bit inside. Gunner, that's something I like. So I'm excited to get into his film. And then Kenneth Gainwell, another guy from the Eagles, kind of depth running back that's come over. So they've made a lot of like small signings. I'd like to get on here and kind of recap those. Maybe just bunch them all together. Whereas I kind of wanted to give Slay like more of a the floor to his own, because I thought that his play deserved it. I think it's going to be, it's definitely going to decide just how good the Steelers defense is next year, because you're going to need him to play a lot of snaps as he kind of keeps the seat warm a little bit for a guy like Corey Trice, or maybe another draft pick, something like that. So as always, I really appreciate your all's continued support, and I will check you guys next time. Peace and love.